Well, good evening. Laddies, lasses, and lassos, welcome to the click. You smell absolutely astounding today. And don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. On this channel, we have a beautiful traditional saying. It's that you cannot spell trauma without mwah. Please repeat after me, tra-mwah. Isn't that gorgeous? Especially when you weaponize it back at people treating you like trash, basically. Have you ever had a moment where a bully or a Karen or a bad character treats you poorly, has some offhand comment, and you just don't know what to say in the moment, but it comes to you in an epiphany in the shower 3 years later? Well, these stories are moments where people had the perfect comeback to traumatize the person right back. So just sit back, relax, enjoy your snacks, and feel your buttocks grow. Enjoy. r/TraumatizeThemBack. If you want to guilt trip me about not being in contact with my parents, I am going to tell you why I'm not. This happened many years ago when I was 20. I was working for a security company as a flex guard, meaning that I was assigned short-term to contracts and usually switched sites every few months or so. I had just started on a new site when this happened. I was being trained on the new site and we were right at shift change, so several people were in the guard shack. I said that I needed to leave on time since I took the bus. The stop was a 20-minute walk away, and it was winter, so waiting over an hour for the next bus wasn't an option. One of the other guards asked me why I don't drive, and I explained that in addition to not having a license at the time, driving would be prohibitively expensive due to the cost of insuring a 20-year-old male driver. The other guard then asked why insurance would be so expensive, and I asked that young men cause more accident than other groups, so our insurance rates are high. The quotes I got at the time were at least $450 a month, and I make $13 an hour. He started talking about insurance options and wouldn't really take no for an answer. I don't know if this is an American thing in general or specific to my area, but people here get weird about adults who don't drive. I was already getting irritated that he was pushing the issue when he asked why I just didn't use my parents' insurance. For some context, I was essentially legally abandoned by my egg donor and her second husband when I was 17, about 2.5 years before this took place. This was still relatively recent at the time. I mean, yeah, it's like a couple of years ago by the time you're 20. That's some pretty recent trauma, fam. I have extremely severe PTSD from what those two did to me, and that means I will need to be under the care of a PsyD for the rest of my life. For understandable reasons, I don't like talking about my family, especially not at work and absolutely not with a stranger on top of that. I explained politely but firmly that using my parents' insurance is not and would not be an option. I mean, at this point, you could just lie and be like, nah, my parents are dead, or whatever, you know? Maybe that will shut them up without having to go into details. You know, that's sometimes an option. Sometimes white little lies are pretty valid. He kept pushing the issue anyways, asking why not, and then what a lot of other young people do. I explained again that it just wasn't an option for me. He pushed even further, and I finally said, exasperated, I am no contact with my parents and cannot and will not be financially tied to them. Anyone with a speck of decency or common sense would know at this point to stop pushing the envelope. Not this guy.
Wow, so you don't even call them on Christmas or Mother's Day or Father's Day? Oh, that is cold. I can't imagine doing that to my parents.
Well, maybe because your parents aren't like raging poo-poo people. How about that? Maybe people act differently. That's like one wild theory in the scenario, is it not? No, but jokes and stuff aside though, that is something that is incredibly prevalent in these kind of stories and insane parent stories, for example, that people just assume someone is being mean to their parents because the only reference they have is their relationship with their own parents. But the thing is that not every relationship is the same, and this goes for friendship, partners, parents, whatever it might be. Not everything is comparable just because you both happen to call some person mother or father. The relation itself can still be vastly different. And he kept going along these lines and I snapped. I am not in contact with my parents because they beat and psychologically tortured me to the point that I almost died when I was 17. And that's after they tried to push me off the edge of the flat earth a few times. So no, I don't call them on Christmas. I have never seen someone before or since shut up that hard. You could have cut the tension in that guard shack with a butter knife. I mean, that's what happens though. One thing with these sort of people that always flabbergasts me a little bit is that they assume that they will have more answers than the person who has literally made this choice for their life for the past few years. And they're like, they can't be a good reason. I call my parents on Christmas. How can everyone not call their parents on Christmas? And it's a weird thing to push because eventually you will get the answer, and the answer is probably more heavy and more complex than whatever assumptions you have made in the past 2.5 minutes sitting in this guard shack. It's very patronizing in a way, isn't it? Oh my god, that's beautiful. Maybe he won't push so hard next time. Sir, I work in a pediatric trauma unit. There is a 4-lane US highway near my house that I take to get anywhere I need to go. Work, grocery store, kids to school, etc. After over a decade of living in my neighborhood and driving it every day, I have gotten pretty adept at knowing the vibe and flow of the road when the lights turn, what traffic ahead will do, etc, etc. So I will wax and wane from 50 to 60 miles per hour, the speed limit is 55, coast down hills to hypermile to red lights. I generally stay in the right lane doing this unless I have to make a left turn, or in situations I will describe ahead. This has enabled me to, several times a month, play one of my favorite games. Arrive at red lights at the same time or even end up ahead of, in a line at the light, people who theatrically careen past me. Oh my god, this is so beautiful when it happens. I love this. Someone whips around me at 75. It's always hilarious to either cruise normally or casually change lanes when I'm clear and end up 3 cars ahead of them at the red light they just accelerated to. Oh my god, I had someone like this in traffic a few days ago. I was just like casually driving, safely as you do as a responsible adult, and they're like, freaking zigzag slalom skiing between cars. Like, and they make a turn slightly in front of me. I keep going on the highway, and they are like, 2 cars ahead of me. They literally saved 3 seconds on like doing the zigzag thing for like a few kilometers straight. It was hilariously sad. My god, so much risk for so little gain. High risk, low reward. It's like the worst combination. One day, almost immediately after I turned onto the highway, I was very dramatically and theatrically passed by a boomer in an SUV adorned with a few prominent bumper stickers.
One big bad mistake, America. The SEALs ended one trip to America, the other in November.
And other lovely items in that vein. And I knew, based on the timing of the red light ahead of me, I might have the most incredible luck in timing. For whatever reason, the moon and the stars aligned that day, because 4 times in a row, I was able to casually pass him or end up directly next to him at a red light, 15 to 20 seconds after they have arrived there. Now, for the bit to be complete, I have to make sure I don't change a single thing about how I drive normally, and to completely ignore the other driver. I have lost out on doing this a number of times because of that, but reacting to them totally invalidates the exercise. Still, after 4 times of meeting or being ahead of him, I admit my latent pettiness began to shine through. And that's what set him off. Watching me coast directly through a newly turned green light, as he was just accelerating hard off the block, I zipped past him at 45-50 miles per hour because I knew the light cycle timing, and I had seen the cross streets were clear. And then I committed what was perhaps the more egregious sin than
being in front of even though I drove slower.
I smiled and waved at the guy as I went by. To add insult to injury, he got held up by traffic in front of him, so he changed lanes abruptly and pulled up behind me with an obvious lead foot. I am sure the Germans have some kind of word for how I felt that day, and man, I felt it big time. Oh yeah, you're talking about Schadefreunde. That's a very good German term. What's the best term? It's like skadeglädje in Swedish. Hurt happiness. It doesn't have a good translation, does it? Sadism. Unfortunately for me, the driver felt it necessary to escalate his drama from not being in front of me when I drove faster to changing lanes to cut off another car and then waiting for me to pull up next to him at the following red light, leaving 50 to 60 feet of space in front of his car to do so.
This is getting really embarrassing for this person real fast. Oh my god.
He rolled down his passenger side window and angrily gestured at me angrily to roll down mine. When I obliged, he rattled down a series of expletives, suggesting my driving skills were more in line with an elderly woman's, so forth and so on. I give him a second, just smiling. I'm an ER nurse by trade, and so his diatribe isn't something that would be out of place in a Monday overnight shift. And then I interrupted him by saying, "Sir," loudly and repeatedly, until he got out of breath enough for me to interject. "Sir, I worked in a pediatric intensive care trauma unit. Ever seen what happens to a 7-year-old when paramedics have to yank them out of a car with the jaws of life?" I gave him a short, 2-sentence, very graphic description of a case I had seen that I occasionally still have nightmares about. After I saw that, I decided to drive more carefully. It took him a few seconds to comprehend what I had said, and I think he was expecting me to join him in cursing and hollering. Then he paused for a moment, looked away from me, rolled up his window, idled for the next 50 to 60 feet up to stop where he would normally have to if he didn't need to throw a temper tantrum, and then drove off at a fairly normal pace when the light turned green. Honestly, this is a beautiful response to road rage people, especially since he's taking such a huge risk for some minimal gains. I have seen people do this in traffic myself, way too many times that I care to count, and it's always so scary how big risks people are willing to take for such minimal gains. And sometimes no gains at all. Sometimes you're just stuck at the same red light anyways. It's like, it's not worth risking so much for saving a few seconds of driving time. It really isn't. I was ecstatic to fall on this infertility grenade if it meant someone else wouldn't have to. I have severe infertility issues. Organ-fusing endo, one of my tubes is collapsed and wouldn't open, no matter what was tried. The ovary with the good tube was lazy and randomly spit out eggs when it felt like it, which wasn't often. My hormones were out of whack, including producing too much testosterone. I have multiple chronic illnesses and I am disabled because of said illness. Free handicap parking for life though, woo! Basically, the top fertility specialist in my state told me I have less than 1% chance of ever getting pregnant. And even if we had the top dollar for IVF, my spouse and I decided the success rate wasn't high enough to bother. Infertility is always a bit of a sore subject anyway, but I had always wanted to have one and adopt one. So my husband and I, who is a A+ sperm according to his analysis, legit what the doctor told him, the audacity when I am so fricked up, I mean honestly, /J. I figured we would just adopt twice, because after 7 years it clearly wasn't in the cards. Or so we thought. How the universe aligned is its own whole butt story. Anyway, being infertile sucks, but I have fairly thick skin. One dude told me I wasn't a real woman because I couldn't get pregnant, and lol, what? Sure, Jan. So every woman, typically above a certain age, is no longer a real woman. That is, okay, that is absolutely wild. Great science there. My spouse and I have been together since 2006, so we constantly got asked, when will you have kids? Why don't you have kids already? Time is running out as you're a blah blah blah. Women today value work, family, that's the reason society is failing, blah blah blah. And all from boomers. Shocking, I know. Every other woman I know who is infertile is incredibly sensitive about it, which is soul-crushing, so no shade. But again, I just don't freaking care and was delighted to perform what I saw as my civic duty. Anytime a boomer would ask about kids, I would pat my belly with a manic grin and tell them, "Can't. I am chock full of tumors and the docs say never," with a really cheerful, upbeat voice, and it was so satisfying watching the horror overcome their faces and then try to backtrack. I like to think some of them learned a lesson those days, which is shut the frick up about kids, you ignorant, festering trash bags of cottage cheese. But they're boomers, so probably not. But at least now no one asks me why I don't have a second. Ah, the hero we need, but not the one we deserve. Casually traumatizing boomers before they traumatize other people. Isn't that beautiful? Preemptive trauma for the sake of others. Ah, a beautiful, beautiful thing. My brother-in-law took sick leave. He is very dedicated to his job and kind of a quiet guy. He took some sick time. A coworker called him to ask something that could have waited, and he told brother-in-law, "You don't sound very sick to me." Brother-in-law stated back, "It's a brain tumor. How should I sound?" The coworker could not find his words for about a minute, then flooded him with apologies. Yes, it was true, and he survived. I mean, that's really nice to hear, at least that it went well in the end. But sometimes people are way too obsessed with like disabilities or sickness that should always be visible. Sick doesn't only mean that you have like a stuffed nose or something like that. There's plenty of stuff in the world where you can be sick or hindered in some way that isn't super visible or doesn't make a sound. The same thing, for example, when Karens go bananas in like handicapped parking spots because someone is able to walk like 3 feet, but they need, for example, a wheelchair for long distances because they have a lot of pain. Because they can stand up by themselves, then all of a sudden it's not viable because it's not, a super visible thing. I mean, you literally have legs, why would you... People do be silly sometimes, don't they? I called my high school bully Hitler, and she apologized to me. Fake initials all around. So I am diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, and dyslexia. Back in high school, I was very upfront about this with all my peers. I am and always was a book so open I might as well be a public library. One time I was talking to a friend, S, about how because of a hormone imbalance, it was impossible for me to have kids. One of the girls that would always harass us special ed kids, B, was listening in and commented out of the blue something akin to,
"It's a relief that you can't have kids, the way you can't make more R-worded children that might turn out like you."
I looked at her, shocked. S, knowing that I have a thick skin, asked her to explain. Knowing S, she was probably trying to get B to dig her grave a little bit deeper, since B didn't realize that our American history teacher, Mr. Z, was right behind her. Mr. Z had a daughter with autism and epilepsy, and S didn't think he would take kindly to the Eugenics that B was spouting. Yeah, that's really what it is, isn't it? That's a pretty wild thing, even for like a tacky high school bully. It's a pretty wild thing to just spit out spontaneously. Oh my lord. After B had fully dug her grave, having said things like,
"The next generation doesn't need your genes, and even if you could have kids, no one would ever want to have them with you,"
I simply responded, "Okay, Hitler." She looked shocked, and so I explained to her that what she was spouting was Eugenics, and that Hitler is the face of Eugenics in the eyes of Western society. Then I turned to our history teacher, Mr. Z, who looked like there should have been steam coming out of his ears at that point, and asked him, "Don't you agree?" For some reason, B thought he was on her side. Oh my... Not only really stupid, but really out of touch as well. My god, I find it ironic that someone is this stupid, ignorant of history, and ignorant of like the consequences of what they're spouting anyway, and have the audacity to call other people like R-worded. You know, that is just something that tickles my irony bone. It's absolutely wild. For some reason, B thought that he was on her side and that he was angry with me. So she immediately started playing victim. What she didn't expect was for Mr. Z to lay into her and lecture her for almost a half hour's worth of our free period about how Eugenics is the base of almost all Nazi mentality. I'm pretty sure at some point in his rage, he asked her how she was better than a Nazi in any way. At the end of it, B was in tears and was apologizing to him repeatedly, but he ended up calling me over and having her apologize to me. Oddly enough, B never bothered me or any special ed kids ever again. I mean, there you go, she had enough pushback to the point that she was traumatized enough to actually never bother or bully people in that way ever again. That is good, I suppose. She learned her lesson and hopefully doesn't do it again. The hormone imbalance turned out to be caused by one of my medications. I am off that med now, so I can have kids. Woo! You see, happy endings all around, heck yes. Edit, thank you for helping me with dyslaxative typos, and thank you for all your support. Oh, I can relate to that one. Not me, like, reading story-based videos and, like, sometimes just getting random words completely wrong. Couldn't be me, cannot relate. Next story, please. Hopefully, he was so traumatized, he will never look at bots the same way again. That is, that's a wild title. This could be like a pop song. When I was a poor, recent graduate of an art school, I used to live in a fairly rough part of Philadelphia. Semi-relevant was that part of my town is well known for delicious Vietnamese food, and I haven't yet realized I am gluten intolerant. Anyway, for some reason my boyfriend at the time and I were eating bami, Vietnamese hoagies, off the hood of his car and talking. No clue why we didn't sit at a table or a stoop, but that part is semi-irrelevant. Just know that I'm leaned up against the Jeep eating and probably had my butt jutted out a bit towards the sidewalk. Anyway, this guy walks up and starts looking me up and down and mumbling about what a fine-looking big butt it is, and proceeds to accidentally brush his hands on my butt as he walks by. I was pissed, but tried to brush it off and not start poo because it's Philly and you never know who has a gun and mental health issues. But then this man proceeds to turn around at the end of the block and starts walking back, licking his lips the whole way, looking for seconds. At the same moment, my recently consumed giant amount of bread was starting to hit my gut and making things rumble. And my devilish plan of opportunity began to unfold. I waited until this guy was like 6 inches away and about to brush by me again, and I just let the nastiest, stinkiest fart of justice rip right onto him. Like I swear I saw it blow his hair back. He shrieked, "Ew! You nasty birch!" and ran away, looking like he had just seen a ghost while I cackled manically. Oh yeah, maybe he won't harass random people on the street ever again. You never know when you get hit by the stink cloud of justice. Yes, indeed. That is absolutely wild, though. Can you imagine that? Not only harassing once or twice, but a third time when they turn back and come back around. That is absolutely insane. The audacity of some people. You're not just talking about random catcalling, you know, someone driving in a car and being like, "Yeah, girl, you poo with that butt." It's like, no, now it's like literally coming back around a second time. The audacity. He really got what he was asking for, didn't he? Be nice to your pharmacist. I lived in an area with lots of old folks. One day, I had to take my kid to pick up a prescription for her mom. As it happens, it must have been a busy day for the pharmacy. There was a pretty long line, and I kept the kid in the shopping cart to do a few laps to get some groceries and come back. Line is still pretty long, but I decide better just wait it out. I am behind this older couple, just trying to keep my toddler entertained. And as I do, I notice the woman force her way to the front of the line from behind me. I have been waiting for a while, 10 to 15 minutes, moved up a few places already, and was supposed to be next. She makes it to the window and leans in and against the plexiglass with her hand over the divider and starts snapping her fingers. This must be what fish in restaurants see.
Give me my prescription.
What the heck is taking so long? I've been in line forever.
False. The pharmacist, who is clearly frazzled and looking for somebody who's been more patient, prescription, turns and says, "I'll be right with you."
Well, I'm here now. I need my darn...
Insert obscure drug name.
I was supposed to take it last night.
Darn, sounds like you should have planned better. Pharmacist assures her she will be right there to help her. My kid and I stop from what we're doing and watch as the woman turns from red to purple, waiting on bated breath for the unwarranted reaction that is sure to come. Yeah, these kind of situations just like waiting for a kettle to boil, isn't it?
Somebody needs to get the frick over and help me. I need my darn drugs. This incompetent girl can't do her job.
The woman who is working the drive-thru window turns, asks the car to wait a moment. Mind you, the driver, though, was just as long of a line, hence why I went inside in the first place. She comes over, looking equally as frazzled as the other pharmacist. Calmly asks the lady to step to the next window. Lady sighs, pushes her cart over, and they begin going through the standard questions. The cashier leaves to go to her computer to look it up. All while the other girl is still trying to help the first couple. Old angry lady keeps ranting about how unacceptable this is, and
this never used to happen.
What do you mean? Lines didn't used to happen?
This generation is lazy and inconsiderate.
Speaking to nobody in particular, but oh, I was listening. The drive-thru lady comes back. "Sorry, ma'am, we haven't received the order from the doctor. Until we get the prescription, we can't fill it. I'd be happy to call them when I can to try to expedite that. Or you can call and see if they can send it over." The lady screams,
I am not going anywhere until I get my frickin' pills.
"All right, I will call them when I am able." She walks away. Now it's my turn at the register. I had worked customer service for years and still do as a server. Don't be rude, pretty easy rule. I push my cart up. Look at the poor frazzled young girl behind the counter, turn to the angry woman. "Wow, sounds like it's a pretty important prescription."
Yes, it is. I need it yesterday. I could have taken it already, but...
I interrupt her. Pretty insane to me you're being so terrible to the people who are going to fill a bottle with what could be your life-saving medication. I know I wouldn't be that brave. The look on her face. I turn to the cashier and say very plainly, "Wow, she is terrible." I turn and she storms off. I pick up the prescription and carry on with my day. Good rule of thumb, be polite to the people who give you things you intend to ingest. I'm not saying it was gold by any means, but the quiet thank you from the cashier had me floating for the rest of the day. This is one thing that really gets me about these sort of entitled people. They trust strangers to not look for payback way too much. I saw this in a recent viral video where some like old dude is blocking like a parking space and like gets behind a car that's already backing up. And I'm like, you're trusting random drivers way too much. I mean, most people are not going to mess with you if you literally sit down in a parking lot. They're not going to bother. They just want to go about their day. So like, squeakiest wheel gets the grease, I suppose. But if you pick that crappy driver, 1 in 100, that is like drunk or gets stung by a bee or just doesn't see you, are you really trusting a stranger that much? Their car is much harder and heavier than your body. And same thing goes here, or same thing goes for servers. Like, do you really trust to go through life and be a butthole to everyone and not a single server is gonna spit in your food? You know? They trust that strangers won't give them petty payback way too much, and they trust way too much like random drivers and stuff, even putting themselves in danger because of it. I never understood that sort of entitlement. It's like a sense of immortality almost. It's so weird. Wanna use your religion to shame me for having my time of the month? I will use it right back against you. I, F17, had this story happen some time ago. Around my sophomore or second year of high school. I was around 14 or 15 at the time, and I was just eating lunch with a few friends in one of the, what our school calls, breakout rooms. We were chilling and having a good time, and I remembered I had to go change my pad since I was on my period that week. However, there is, or was a kid a grade below me, who we'll just call Jay. Jay is known for being a butthole, and while he had or has his decent moments, 90% of the time he tries to shove him being a Christian down everybody's throat, even though his actions are far from Christian-like. It's funny how that do be the case sometimes, isn't it? Throws racial slurs.
You know that Bible quote when Jesus said, "Thou shalt call thy fellow people as many slurs as possible"? That's how you end up in heaven, baby. Oh, yes, indeed.
Is loud and disruptive during class, disrespectful toward teachers and other students, and outright made fun of one of my friends once because they were Muslim and made all the stereotypical jokes you can imagine surrounding the religion. But in this particular instance, Jay saw me take out my pad and proceeded to give me a few dirty looks. I asked if there was a problem, and he made a remark along the lines of, "Don't freaking touch me!" According to him, the Old Testament in the Bible claims that when a woman is on her time of the month, if she touches a man, he will become unclean. I mean, with a mouth like that, it sounds like you're plenty unclean already if you want to go that route, but alright, yo. I rolled my eyes at him and left to go change my pad as he proceeded to go off about, "My period isn't natural," and "I'm disgusting," and even flipped through his Bible to try to find the verse he was talking about and read it out loud to me. He's carrying a little Bible with him to be an insufferable bully about, but try to reference the Bible at why he's justified in being an insufferable bully. Man, he sounds great! Like he was an exorcist trying to expel a demon or some crazy BS. I come back, lightly tease him, and brush it off as we switch classes. However, I came back to the same room for my Spanish class, and sure enough, Jay shared the class with me. I tell my friend, who was also in class with me, what happened, and to my surprise, they actually used to know Jay pretty well, and they actually helped me come up with the revenge idea. Apparently, according to my friend, Jay is so Christian, he believes, or at least used to back when this happened, in the Ouija board stuff so much that he thinks demons or Satan himself will come haunt him down if he even touches one. And although this was kind of a buttholy and petty of us, we felt he deserved it in the moment. I mean, sounds like reasonable payback in my opinion. This is gonna be juicy, isn't it? So after they tell me this about Jay, we decide to get back at him by making a poopy homemade Ouija board out of paper during class. So we poorly scribbled the letters on a page and even did the piece that you put your fingers on out of paper as well. After he comes in the room, we call him over and show him, and even pretend we're playing by moving the piece around the board. And I am not joking. He freaks the frick out. He starts yelling and pleading for us to put it away, saying we're cursing the room with a demonic presence, and even left the room, tattled to the teacher, who didn't do anything about it, until we complied with his request to put it away. He didn't come back in that room for the rest of the period. And to rub it in a little more, I would accidentally brush up against him or poke him once or twice a day for the rest of the time I was on my period that week. I know it was petty, but god darn, it was hilarious to see. Eddie, thank you for the upvotes and award. I really didn't expect this to blow up as much as it did. Grateful to you all. Honestly, sounds like pretty good payback. It sounds like a bully that's just trying to hide behind a belief or something like that to be a poopy person. Sadly, those sort of people exist that will just use something as an excuse to like justify their poopy behavior. Surprisingly common, sadly. So turning it against them in this sort of way is very satisfying indeed. It really is. Wedding transphobe crashed a friend's wedding party, so I snap back at her with her own logical flaws. For context, I'm in my 20s and I am an AFAB non-binary gender fluid, but I prefer masculine terms. I am out to everyone in my life, and I was recently the best man of my childhood's best friend's wedding. We've known each other since we were kids and way before I got my binder and started styling my hair in a more gender-neutral way. All that is to say, my friend is a very, very supportive man, and both he and his wife, who is actually bi, almost read it accidentally bi, but not out to anyone except me, my friend, and a few others, knows why I used the women's bathroom despite calling me his best man. But he knows I don't fully identify with that term, and he fully supports me being non-binary and gender fluid. So it was doing the after party, or whatever you call those things. I'm in a poly relationship, so I legally can't get married with my partners, so I don't know anything about weddings. When I meet one of the bridesmaids, she was my friend's wife's sister, and she is transphobic. Which, if her family is anything like her, probably explains why my friend's wife isn't out to anyone in her family, that I know of. Anyway, I had to use the bathroom, and I guess she either followed me in there or had to go to the bathroom the same time I did. And I walked into the women's bathroom since I have been using that my whole life and was more comfortable using that bathroom. When I exited the stall, she was waiting for me, as I washed my hands and left. She went on a rant about how I should be using the men's room, and we don't need perverts in this women's room. She was loud and clearly trying to draw attention to me and get a crowd to support her. I didn't want to ruin my friend's and his wife's special day, but eventually I got fed up and turned to her and said, "Ma'am, I bleed out of my parts every month. I have used the women's room as long as I can remember. I was born with the same parts as you. So you're telling me I'm perverted for using the bathroom I was assigned at birth, therefore countering your whole argument entirely? Look, if I had a flat chest and more confidence in using which bathroom I wanted, I would use the men's room more often. But I don't want to look at random guys' parts outside of my own partner's parts. Normally, I would curse this birch out for her dumb logic, but there were kids present. She looked at me, dumbfounded, as if she had a moment of realization that not all trans people were born male and looking to invade women's spaces. She gaped like a fish for a moment, and then red-faced and angrily left the room. I apologized to my friend for ruining his day, and he and his wife laughed and said she deserved it. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of the people that are so spiteful and hateful don't actually understand the subject that they're hateful towards enough to even get it right. It's like the we can always tell crowd, but the surprising part is that they very often cannot, in fact, tell. And this very much falls in the same category. She had already assumed, like a male to female sort of thing, but that wasn't even accurate. Like, they cannot tell, that's the thing. They're hateful towards something they have heard someone speak about or hyped up media or something like that, you know, scaremongering and that kind of BS. And then they buy into it too much, but then in situations like this, you realize that they don't actually know what they're even hating, which I'm not sure if it makes it better or worse. Maybe slightly better, because it's ignorance means it's like there might be a bit of hope. Maybe? But it's very funny either way. I do hope she left the wedding after that and you got to have a good evening. I am disabled, not visibly, and my response to "You're too young" is, last time I checked, chronic illness and disabilities don't ask for an ID. I've only had one get rude and said my chronic illness can't be that bad because I'm young. Like, dude, just say you made a mistake. It wouldn't be that big of a deal, but you chose to dig in your heels. I can't let this go. So I told him the day they no longer needed pediatric cancer wings is the day he will be right. Ooh, I mean, yeah, good potential future dreams, I suppose, in one way, like, technically correct, but, like, yeah, it do be like that, though, isn't it? My god, just like, children hospitals are a thing, fam. Like for starters, come on. Answered a coworker's question and got them to shut up for the rest of the day. Content warning, CSA and other childhood bad stuff mentioned. I used to work on a team where we would support sales locations for a company where needed. This meant I had a lot of different coworkers depending on where I worked that day. Now, I am a trans woman and don't pass 100%, so I often get questions related to that from my coworkers. While I can find some of these questions annoying, mostly when they are questions inappropriate for the workplace. Don't ask your coworkers about their genitals, people. This is the kind of funny thing when it comes to, for example, trans topics and stuff. It will be really weird and inappropriate to ask anyone about their genitals in the workplace. Like, if I go up to like a random person in an office and be like, hey, describe your genitals to me, I would be dragged away for like sexual harassment. But for some reason, when it comes to specifically trans people just lose their common sense. It's kind of interesting. I often have no issues answering good faith questions. However, some people don't really seem to think before they ask questions like the ones I mentioned before. Most of the time, I just tell people I am uncomfortable answering those questions. However, one coworker asked a question so freaking stupid the only way I could respond was the truth. One good comeback that comes to mind would just be to turn it around. Hey, what about your genital? If you describe yours first, what's the shape and diameter and stuff? Describe your genitals first, and I will follow suit. You know, there you go. Maybe then they will realize how ridiculous the question is, you know? Anyway, let's get on with the story, shall we? The question she asked was,
So is the whole trans thing caused by childhood trauma?
This took me a bit off guard because I have been through a lot as a child. I was severely abused in a Catholic Scouts organization from about 6 to 9. Things from physical things and being locked up alone to naughty things, not really the things I want to think about when dealing with poopy customers all day. So I answered the only way I could think of with the most casual tone I could muster. No, I know a lot of other trans people who didn't go through stuff like that. I did experience that though. Thanks for reminding me. Quietest break I ever had after that.
What did she expect as an answer?
If the answer is yes, you know, you're gonna get to this whole thing where like reminding someone of their trauma and stuff. If the answer is no, it takes you down this weird route where you have just assumed this thing is only caused by like bad stuff. What are you expecting to happen from taking the conversation in this direction? I think the answer is they didn't expect anything because they didn't think ahead of time. Who would have thunk it? If you don't want to let me go to the nurse's office, have fun with my vomit. I think I was 9 or 10 or something when I was in elementary school class and we had a substitute teacher. I was feeling super under the weather, so like any sane person, I asked to go down to the nurse and she gave me a look, saying, if it was really that bad, you should have stayed home. Which would have been reasonable, except I was on the floor sobbing my eyes out because of how poopy I felt. I mean, that doesn't help. You can also get sick during the day, you know? It's not that you can always tell how crappy you're gonna feel. At some point, it's gonna hit throughout the day, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be when you're still home. This is a wild logic. She wouldn't even let me go to the bathroom because she was worried that I would go to the office just to spite her. I wonder why. Eventually, it got so bad, I vomited all over her fancy shoes. I got sent home with a temperature of 104 degrees and half that class got sick. Good work, substitute teacher. Instead of just sending them to the nurse's office, they could be sent home. You got the whole class sick and got your shoes ruined. What a thing to double down on. Good job. A man shouldn't do the dishes. Just to add before the story, I don't care if this can be called revenge because it was done by an 8-year-old kid. But I'll go with the tag. So, as stated before, this story is about my nephew and it happened when he was 8 years old. Let me tell you all about this kid because he is so darn smart. He is honest and doesn't let anyone lie, even if it's his parents. He has an amazing sense of justice too, so my family has a lot of stories about him. One of our favorite ones is when he came clean about gaming 5 minutes past the stipulated time when he was trying to kill a boss and saying the deserved punishment of taking away 5 minutes of his gaming time the next day was too light because he knew he did that bad thing on purpose even though he knew it was bad. What a little sweetheart! Oh my god, killing boss? Valid though. Absolutely valid. I'm currently grinding through the Elden Ring DLC and I'm getting absolutely smashed. It's a good time. Anyway, my sister is married with a guy that comes from a pretty traditional family. His ILs are a bit of a pain in the butt, if you ask me. They think my sister should be a stay-at-home mom and spend the whole time they're in her house saying that she should quit her job, one she's amazing at, and the boss, FYI. They think it's terrible my sister makes their son, her husband, do laundry, which is just putting the clothes in the laundry machine, mind you. Oh, so it's not even like the whole cycle, it's just like carrying the stuff to the machine. Yeah, that takes about 2.5 minutes. So one time, during one of the visits, my nephew was going to wash the dishes because it was his day. Back then, he washed the dinner's dishes every 5 days or so, if I'm not mistaken. And mother-in-law jumped on the opportunity to say,
a man shouldn't do the dishes.
And my nephew, bless his heart, answered without skipping a beat,
good thing I'm not a man, I am a boy.
Mother-in-law tried to berate my sister for this, but she was so giddy about how smart her boy was that it didn't even bother her. My nephew is now 12, and his sense of justice keeps traumatizing my sister's in-laws. I love this kid. That is so beautiful. Oh my god. And also like the realization, right? Even if you want to go a very practical route about this sort of stuff, most households nowadays, with how expensive rent is, for example, cannot survive on only one income. Like, even if you want to go that route, for most people, it's not even like a pragmatic, viable option in the first place. So, I don't know, very wild opinion to hold in this day and age, to be honest, my god. And also it's up to like the family to decide, isn't it? Like, my god, fam. Traumatize me because I am lesbian? Let's see how you handle the same treatment. Okay, so I discovered the subreddit thanks to the amazing click. Oh my god, I've heard about him. He's a very silly boy. Now let's dive into this juicy pile of trauma and revenge. I, 28F, am married to my beautiful wife, 27F. And guess what? Of course my mother has to bug me about it and try to fix me. Oh, she's single and has been through 5 divorces before giving up on dating. Whoo! Yeah, maybe not the person you would look to for relationship advice in general. The track record is questionable to begin with, but also try to like fix someone. They're also like 28. Don't you think they have like, I don't know, figured out a decent chunk of that sort of stuff by now? What do you mean fix? Oh. Anyway, I remember vividly when I came out to her about 11 years ago, and she said, "It's just a phase, and you'll grow out of it," which were stupid excuses, obviously. Well, when I first started dating my wife, she was furious and texted me that this is absolutely outrageous. Of course, she would say that. I was used to her abusive or dismissive behavior because she wasn't the best parent growing up. Well, I didn't really mind it, I was expecting that, but what I wasn't expecting is her sitting me down and making me watch naughty VHS tapes and normal naughty films, trying to convince me how good naughties between straight couples can be, and how it's what God intended and created a man and a woman for. Okay, isn't this literally though what they used to call, like way back in the day, like decades ago, they had like, what's it called? Is it called transition therapy? It's something like that, when they try to like basically cure people that were gay. This is literally a thing that happened throughout history. This is wild. This is an absolutely insane thing to do. It's a pretty insane thing to do, you know, no matter the context, but this definitely makes it worse. I was horrified and disgusted at the moment, but then inspiration hit. Sweet, sweet revenge was about to hit hard. I gathered some naughty lesbian VHS tapes and films from my friends, as I didn't own any, and packed them up in an Amazon box. She had ordered something, and I'm pretty sure it's more films since she is addicted. And I mailed them to her. I also hid a note in the bottom of the box saying, "See, this is fun too." Well, she never contacted me again, and thank God she didn't. My wife and I are going to celebrate 7 years together next month. We still laugh about the story to this day. Oh my god, she went no contact about it? Holy crap. Let me force you to watch these adult films that I know you're not into. And someone just like turns it around and be like, "Oh, I'm going no contact. How could you?" You know that when someone goes no contact with you for doing the same thing to them that they did, well, reversed to you, I suppose, they kind of admit that what they did was a pretty bad thing, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't go no contact. That is pretty much admitting what they did in the first place was really bad. Because when it happened to them, they literally cut someone up. It might also have to do with just like raging homophobia, to be honest, but it's a pretty like interesting case of irony, is it not? Humans are supposed to be stupid. I graduated from high school this past Friday, so we had a small family gathering to celebrate. My deeply Christian and homophobic grandmother began talking about how, according to the Bible, humans weren't supposed to be gay, and that it's not what God wanted. She went on and on until my amazing cousin had enough. She said, according to the Bible, humans were supposed to be stupid. That was what God wanted. And clearly you seem to have followed that example. Grandma was quiet for the rest of the night. Oh my god, that is so beautiful and funny. Oh, just turning it right back around. Well, laddies, lasses, and lasses, I do hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed having you here, you wonderful, beautiful beings. And I will see you again in the very near future. Take care. Mwah.